Hey guys, it's good to be back with you today. We're on a bit of a roll. We're talking about just doing what Jesus tells us to do. If we're servants of God, which apparently we need to be, then we will revel in the opportunity to do just that. But we spoke yesterday about how do I know what Jesus wants me to do? And we said, well, first of all, you've got to read the Bible. The Bible is very clear. As you read that, things that you will read will speak to your mind, will speak to your heart, and you'll know exactly what it is that you need to do. The second thing is by communion with God, by just knowing Him, spending time with Him, getting to understand His character, getting to understand who He is. Once you get to know Him like that, hearing Him is never a problem. We could always hear the one we love above the roar of the waves, above the voice of the crowd. We will hear His voice speak. But there's another way that we know what to do, or we need to know what to do when He tells us. And that is through the burden that God will lay upon your heart. God speaks through the broken heart. The sad thing is, for many of us, our hearts are hard, that we don't always feel the pain of people around us. We don't always weep for people anymore. Now, I'm not using that in a literal sense only, because there are some of us who cry more than others over the dilemma of life. But recently in our town, we've had some incredibly tragic things take place in and around our community. And our hearts have been broken over the things that we have seen taking place around us. And the burden is so heavy in our hearts. The burden is so heavy that we have to do something to help, something to encourage the people around us, something to encourage our staff members who have to live with this stinking stuff that's going on out there, and they are responding to a burden. You see, to many people, doing what other people would do is not always a good idea. They don't get it, but when your heart breaks, you will get it. I just think of that amazing man Nehemiah, and here he is, hundreds of miles away from home, and God breaks his heart over the issue of what's going back on in Jerusalem there. And he hears from Hanani, his brother, and he hears about the dilemma and the devastation of what's going on there. The walls are down, the temple is being built, but the people are in a hopeless situation. God broke his heart. He prayed great prayers. He wept tears of repentance. And he said, I will do what I can to respond to this burden. Now I want to ask you, when last did you respond to a burden that God gives to you? Sometimes we're so hooked up on things that we think we need to do, and we ignore the great burden that God has put upon us. We need to respond to that burden despite what people may say, despite the circumstances of life and the challenges we face in order to be able to do that. Think of Nehemiah. Man, he had to face huge challenges to respond to his burden. His heart was broken. He had to stand before the king and, in a sense, almost break the rules of the kingdom, because you weren't allowed to cry in the presence of the king. You weren't allowed to look miserable. And he was asked by the king to state his case as to why he was looking so miserable. He told the king, and the king said, Nehemiah, I'm with you. I don't understand your burden. I've pillaged Jerusalem before, but now I'm with you in your burden, and I'm asking you, what can I do to help you? And as he took one day at a time, responding to the brokenheartedness of what this burden had done to him, and God led him to do extraordinary, albeit supernatural things. Responding to the burden of God is what Jesus wants you to do. So don't sit there in isolation and look at the world around you and say, terrible what's going on out there. That's not good enough. We need to go, terrible what's going on out there. What do I need to do in response to what God is telling me to do in order to extend His kingdom and be a blessing to the crowd and the people around us? Man, I hope that makes sense to you. And I really hope that you'll respond appropriately. Have a good day. We'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.